Hi, and welcome to the Child Care Aware of Minnesota Legislative Update for Tuesday, February 25th. I will be covering action through Friday, February 21st. Just a reminder that you can come to our website and find all of these legislative updates as well as our bill tracker, where we do monitor bills that have been introduced that impact childcare, early education, or school-age care. So please take a look at that and follow along for those bills have been introduced but may have not yet had action on these legislative updates. I will primarily talk about things that have had a hearing or are moving in the House or the Senate. So let's get right to that. This last week, there were several bills heard in the House and Senate committees. First of all, on the House side, actually, the House Fraud and Oversight Committee did not hear a bill, but continued their weekly hearings, listening to different elements of state government talk about how they try to guard against fraud and provide oversight when it comes to particularly grants to nonprofits. So this week, it was the Office of Grants Management talking about their work and how they both support and work with the various state agencies who in turn hold the contracts with state nonprofits. And I am sure there will be more to come on that committee as they move their way through that process. Not all of these grants and contracts they are reviewing have to do with childcare, early childhood. They're across the board, but they often will touch on our topics. In the House Children and Families Committee, where most of our bills do start their course, there were three bills heard this week, plus an overall presentation. So first of all, House File 656, carried by Representative Zalesnikar, and this is a bill that would require the department to give a variance for a child care center if their license capacity limit is basically if they've got indoor space that's within 100 square feet of the current limit. So it would expand slightly the ability to enroll additional children as long as that space is within 100 feet of what's required. That bill was laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Also, House File 655, Representative Zalesnikar as well. This is a bill that looks at the question of family child care and would allow family child care providers to exclude two of their children or exempt two of their children when it comes to the purposes of counting capacity limits. This is a concept that's been discussed many times in the past. The question of allowing some flexibility for family child care providers who have their own children in their own care. It would not change the ratios of infants and toddlers. So this primarily would impact older children who happen to, of course, be in the home because their parent is the provider. That was also a bill that was laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. And finally, House File 633, carried by Representative Nadeau. This is a companion to the Senate bill that I've reported on in the past that seeks to provide some kind of tax relief for our family child care providers. The difference is through an amendment in the committee, Representative Nadeau's bill comes at it from the approach of an exclusion. So if you're a family child care provider, you're paying property tax, your first percentage of that would be excluded. And then therefore that becomes a burden on the property tax in the community level. In the Senate, it is still being fashioned as a credit, same end effect. Family child care pays less in their property tax, but the state would make up the difference. So we're already seeing some different approaches, and that will, of course, should these bills both prevail, will need to be worked out eventually in conference committee. So that bill, House File 633, was re-referred to the tax committee, and it will eventually line up with the committee, the bill rather in the Senate side in the tax committee. Finally, there was a presentation last week in the House Family or Children and Families Committee about childcare licensing. So pretty much the entire hearing was a presentation from the licensing division at DHS, and a lot of time for questions and answers by the members about how licensing works, what some of the implications are, how they go about making some of the changes. There was a portion of that hearing that dealt with the upcoming regulation modernization next draft and some of the next steps involved with that. So I suspect this will be also an ongoing conversation in the House during the Children, Youth and Families Committee. On the Senate side, there was one bill heard last week. That was Senate File 91, carried by Senator Hoffman. And this is a bill that would extend what is currently in legislation, but due to sunset in July. This is a bill that allows an aide to substitute for a teacher during morning arrival and afternoon departure times, as long as that total amount of time does not exceed 25% of the center's daily hours of operation. So again, helping to juggle, I guess I would say, the center-based staff and allow an aide to cover a classroom in those times. There are some stipulations about what that aide needs to have. They need to be at least 18 years of age. They need to have worked in that center for at least 30 days. and they need to have completed all of their pre-service and their first 90 days of training from licensing before they could ever serve in that capacity. So again, this is something that exists in the books, and it would seek to make it permanent. We will be seeing a House version of that bill coming up in the coming week. And then finally in the Senate, Ag and Veterans Committee. We often forget to think about agriculture as one of our areas, but that is where the Farm to School and Early Childhood or Early Care Programs appropriation lives. And this was indeed a bill to continue to expand, I believe, or at least renew the early care or the Farm to School and Early Care appropriation. So that's been a very valuable program, I think, for a lot of childcare programs. And we don't want to forget about the early education side of the Farm to School bill. So it was good to see that have some time with the committee. That was it for last week. Coming up this week, as I mentioned, we will see the House companion to the Teachers Aid bill. We will see another presentation in the Fraud Prevention and Oversight Committee, this time by the Child Care Assistance Program staff on how they specifically provide oversight to the CCAP or Child Care Assistance Program. And then a couple of other related bills having to do with regulation and ratios, which I will report to on during next week's update. So take a peek, like I mentioned, at our bill tracker. There were 17 new bills this last week alone. Many of those are companions to bills that have already been introduced. But as I've said before, and we'll say again, things are picking up and moving along pretty quickly now, kind of making up for lost time. So be sure to take a peek at that. And once again, always tell us if you see bills or you know of bills rather that you don't see on the tracker or that you would like me to talk about a bit more on these updates. Happy to do so. So for that, I will stop and we will plan on seeing you here next week. Thanks for joining us.